Good morning, folks, and welcome to the WellMed Charitable Foundation Caregiver Teleconnection session entitled Help, I Am a People Pleaser and It's Killing Me by Dr. Natalee Oliver. Welcome, Dr. Oliver. We're so happy to have you back.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. As Evelyn said, I'm a doctor, but it's a doctor of social work. I'm a clinical social worker, the master's in gerontology. And so, and I'm also an Alzheimer's advocate. So I'm definitely happy to be here. I like to just give a background. I work full-time at MCC. It's a junior college here in Waco, Texas. I teach nursing home administrators and assisted living managers. But I've also, you can see on the left side, my clinical background. And I just like to show that so you can see who is this person trying to tell us things. So I've done individual group therapy. I've worked a lot. I focus with adults, but really older adults, 65 and over, and caregiving. That's my passion. So definitely glad to be here. I also like to share personally, my parents moved in with my husband and I think it's about 2 years ago now. I'm really bad with time, but my dad has dementia and my mom is a very strong woman, but she was to the point where she just couldn't take care of all the things anymore. And so they've been living with us. So not only do I teach on Alzheimer's, aging, caregiving, but now I'm actually living it. So it's broadened my horizon and made me have a whole new set of empathy as a caregiver. If you've ever come to any of my presentations, I really like to start with numbers because really it's the impact, and that's what I like to start with. So Art put out this talking about caregivers and just all these numbers that to me are so important as to why we as caregivers and professionals, whether it's personal or professional, need to understand the value of this. So you can see 38 million family caregivers in the USA in 2021 provided 36 billion hours of care to an adult that needed help with what we call ADLs, activities of daily living. That's like dressing, bathing, toileting, transferring, those physical needs. And it equaled $600 billion. So that's unpaid care that all of us are giving to people when we help as caregivers. So just some other information here. Basically what it's saying is that the ones that are out there 65 and up are needing help with at least their activities of daily living. And then the second PowerPoint is just, again, to reiterate, we as caregivers, we're helping with these physical needs, these ADLs, but we're also providing emotional support, social support. We're handling these complex medical, sometimes nursing tasks, like wound care, giving injections, things. I mean, there's just so much pressure and things that we're doing as caregivers. And the report talked about 3/5 of family caregivers are also employed. And so you think about all that adds on to the stress level as well. And then we have what's called sandwich generation, and that's where you're taking care of young ones and older ones. And so that compounds the stress level as well. So why am I pointing out all of this that you do as a caregiver? Because how many times have you said yes to a request when deep down you either did not have time to do it or you just didn't want to do it? How many times have you put others' needs before your own? And that's how I got the title about people pleasing. And so we know this intellectually, but sometimes our heart takes over with that people pleasing. So there may not be anything miraculous I tell you today, but it's good to rehear these things and say, oh yeah, I'm not doing that. I need to do that. But what we're trying to get at is for us to be healthy, successful caregivers, we've got to balance our needs, the needs of the person we're caring for, and the needs of everyone else. So what does it look like? People pleasing, it's this strong urge to please others at our own expense. There's no medical term for it. It's an informal label. And yes, things may temporarily feel good when we're helping others to this extent of a people pleaser, but that feeling doesn't last. And so what happens when we meet these criteria for being a people pleaser, we are having fewer resources to re-energize and take care of ourselves. So I'm not talking about doing kind things and wanting to help others and being flexible. I'm talking about when it's at our own expense and we're not taking care of ourselves physically, mentally, spiritually, etc. So I'm going to talk about some signs and just make a mental note or write down if any of these sound familiar to you. It's hard for you to say no. I can't say no. People will think I don't care about them. We're talking about when this becomes a pattern. This is just your automatic, I can't say no. I always say yes. And so, but what you're really telling people is that their needs come before yours, always. So think about that. What if you say, I'm a giver. I love giving. It feels good to give. I love to give. But think about, do you give with a certain goal? Are you hoping that, oh, okay, if I give and do this and people please, is it going to be reciprocated? What will I get back in return?
Mm.
So it even can lead to where we start feeling like a martyr, like I do everything, no one appreciates me. So is it getting to that extent? Because that's not healthy. So we're looking at what is our motive for giving. Another sign, you struggle with authenticity. This is kind of where you're pleasing others so much that you fail to recognize your own needs. You may not be able to identify, verbalize, articulate how you feel. And so what this leads to is you're not being true to yourself because you're so focused on pleasing others. And it may be to where you feel like to a point where I can't even voice my own needs, even if you want to. So the example down here is you might avoid telling someone how they made you feel really bad because you tell yourself, oh, they didn't mean it. If I say something, it'll only hurt them. So you're just not being true to yourself and what's really going on. How many, you can probably think of someone, if it's not yourself, you apologize, or the people that accept fault when it's not even their reason for the blame. So you know those people that just say sorry and they want to apologize, this readiness to accept blame. And you worry that if you don't apologize, people are going to be mad. They're not going to trust you. They're not going to like you. So I need to please them. You're quick to agree, even when you don't. You want to win that approval. So I'm going to say, yes, you're right. Yes. But what this can cause is you might tell friend A, yes, you agree with them. Tell friend B, oh, no, I agree with you. And they're totally opposite ends. So what do you really believe? So again, you're just not being authentic because you're wanting to people please. Some more signs. Are you regularly taking on extra work, even if you don't have the time? Are you overcommitting to plans or responsibilities and never making time for yourself? Do you avoid advocating for your own needs, saying, oh, I'm fine, when you're really not? Do you avoid disagreeing with other people or voicing your honest opinion? You're putting this pressure on yourself. Do you go along with things that you're not happy about to avoid friction because it makes you too anxious to upset others? So those are some of the signs. We talked about a definition. We talked about the signs. Where does this people pleasing come from? Here's some of the top reasons. You want others to like you. It's human nature. We want other people to like us. So we want to keep people happy, and we worry if we don't agree with them or do what they ask that they won't like us. Or we might have this strong desire to be needed. It's my identity. It's my purpose. I am a people pleaser. I don't know what to be if I'm not doing for others. So you believe maybe you have a better chance of receiving affection if someone needs you. Anxiety. Sometimes you may feel anxious about fitting in. We have there's a diagnosis of social anxiety. And this is when you have anxiety to the point where you feel people are scrutinizing every little thing you do. They're judging you and so focused on what you're doing. And so you want to control these perceptions of what people think of you. So you just agree so that they're going to like you. Low self-esteem. You may feel that you're worth less than others. And that so you need that approval from others. What you want, what you need is just not important. And you may feel that people only care about you when you're useful. And you need that praise and that appreciation from others to build yourself up. So you're relying on others to help you feel better about yourself. Fear of rejection. This is something to really think about. Those early relationships that you had growing up with your caregivers, with your parents, how did they give you approval and love? Was it based on your behavior? So you realized, I better do something so that I can get their love. Now, you may not have put it in those words, but you were learning that through the actions. And so you learned that I've got to do what they want. And so some people pleasers are doing things before they're even asked to do them, because that's how they were conditioned and programmed. Conflict avoidance. I think of the people that put their head in the sand. I don't want to disagree. I don't want to offend others. So I'll just do what they want. I'll just please them. And I love this and I have all the sources of everything I'm talking about on here today, because there were some things that I hadn't thought about. But you think about culture and socialization. So certain families, certain cultures may have this duty to please others. We look at the total whole. We don't look at the individual person. And so it's very virtuous to be selfless and to take care of others, which can lead to extreme people pleasing. And this kind of goes along with it, where there's some inequity in roles. So, society a lot of times has said women are naturally nurturers and caregivers. So there's this expectation, because I'm female, that I have to be the people pleaser and I have to put other person's needs first, or it may at least influence it. And so some women may internalize this and believe this because that's what society and culture is saying around them. This one, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but there is a diagnosis of personality disorders called dependent personality disorder. And so that is, I put links here. You can learn more about that, but there is a diagnosis, again, when you are so focused on needing other people's approval to make even the simplest of decisions. And then the last cause I want to talk about is there's so many traumas that you could have experienced. So, and I love this article I found. It was talking about, we always talk about with trauma, we have the fight, flight, or fleeing. But they talked about fawn. And this is an extreme form of people pleasing. So what it's talking about is there was some trauma maybe you've gone through in childhood, maybe with your partner, something you've gone through to where you learned that you better people please and you better agree because you have such a strong fear and you're in survival mode. And so it's safer to do what other people want versus what you want, because you need to be safe. And of course, you can see that I put a link here. Read more about people pleasing as a trauma response if you want to learn some more about that. So how does this affect you? You probably already know these answers, but we're going to briefly go over them. Trying to earn the approval of others means you're neglecting your own needs and feelings. And if you think about it, you're kind of putting on an act. You're not, again, not being authentic to who you are, and you're kind of saying just what you think other people want to hear. And so it's not exactly being honest, and it can hurt you and the relationships that you have. So let's look at some more ways that it affects you. You probably have had times when you feel resentful. You're feeling like, I don't have any choices. I'm always having to do for others, kind of going back to that martyr syndrome we were talking about. And the thing to think about is some people may not even realize you're making these sacrifices because it's just become a part of who you are. And so we're getting resentful and anger, and they may have no clue about it. Now, they may be taking advantage as well. This is going to roll over into your relationship problems, because if you're having resentment, if you're feeling like you don't have any choices, and you're feeling like others are taking advantage of you, then of course you're going to be unhappy, and that's going to roll over into your relationships and how you're interacting with others. Again, it may affect your loss of identity. I don't even know who I am if I'm not pleasing others or doing for others. And you've lost that sense of what makes you happy. Who are you? Which kind of leads into the next one, role conflicts. Again, going back to that, I just made it up, the chameleon effect, where we're just acting one way in front of someone, we're acting another in front of another. Well, what if friend A and B talk and they're like, wait, she said she agreed with me on this. She told me she agreed with me. So you're going to have conflicts, again, affecting your relationships with others. And then to a detrimental point, it can be a harm to others. So you want to fit in so bad that you may agree with or join in on any negative talk or things that are going on about others. People take advantage of you, again, whether they know it or not. And this is more than just even your physical health. It can be your emotional health that's taken advantage of, your financial situation could be taken advantage of. And so it can even get to where it's mental abuse as well, because they know, hey, this person wants to please me. So these are at the extremes, but it can be that slippery slope where it gets to this. And then just some common things we know, if you are a people pleaser, some risk you have is stress. Again, you're giving all that energy, that time, that emotion to the other people, that you're going to have stress, and then your body's going to get fatigued, your emotions and physically. You're going to get tired. You may be a little more grouchy. And then again, starting to neglect your own self-care. And then you might even get to where the relationships that you have, they just don't satisfy you anymore. And we know a good, healthy relationship has balance. It has give and take, not just giving. And sadly, this one I thought was real interesting. Others might become frustrated with you, because think about it. If you're always saying yes, can you really do everything? I am a recovered people pleaser, but I was always saying yes to things that when it came down to my social life, a lot of my girlfriends started calling me No-Show Natalee, because by the time it came to social, I was exhausted. And so in the moment, I would believe it, and I would say, yes, I'll be there. And then when it came down to it, I was like, I'm exhausted. I can't. So yeah, it led to that. And I mean, that was eye-opening. So how can you become a recovered people pleaser like me? It was a lot of work, but I'm so thankful. If you want, first of all, you've got to think of these are some patterns, and we've got to break these patterns. And so we have to recognize these patterns and these behaviors that we're doing. So becoming aware, so coming to presentations like this today or listening to it on the podcast is really good, because you're becoming aware, and you can see which points that I talked about that you identify with. And so, but then you also have to you have to tell yourself and stick with it that you're going to make some changes. So first of all, you want to show kindness when you mean it. Again, being authentic of when you really want to be kind. So when someone asks you to do something and you're wanting to do something, what is your intention? Are you just wanting it to have that control over them, to have them owe you, to have them hopefully reciprocated? Or do you just want to do something kind? And if you do this kind act, are you going to become resentful, etc., or is it going to bring you joy? So that's just something you can stop and think about. The second thing is practice putting yourself first. You need energy and emotional resources to help others. Again, we know this intellectually, but we're not practicing it in the moment. If you don't take care of yourself, you are not capable. And many of you are caregivers. If you're not taking care of yourself, how can you help take care of the one that you love? So putting yourself first, your needs first, is not selfish. It's healthy. Number 3, be decisive. Start trusting your own instincts. Trust it if you want to say no. Don't always depend on what others believe. And so sometimes people pleasers have a hard time believing in what their answer would be and start questioning themselves. So you've got to break this habit. If you make a mistake, well, okay, you learned from it, but you've got to start trusting in yourself. 4, take your own advice. Man, I tell this to a lot of clients, and we are so kind to others, but man, we are so tough on ourselves. And so if you think about, if you had someone come to you with the same issues you're going through, what kind of advice would you give them? Think about how much grace we give others, but we don't give it to ourselves. Challenge those negative thoughts. A lot of us have those automatic thoughts that come in our mind. They won't like me. They won't find me valuable. Who am I if I don't perform this task that they're asking? Challenge those thoughts and quit beating yourself up. What you can do is say, stop. Even if you need to physically point your hand out or verbally say it, and then have a list of positive affirmations, positive statements that you can replace this with. For instance, if you think, oh, if I say no, they won't like me, stop. That doesn't mean they won't like me just because I say no this once. Or if they don't like me, then they really don't care about me anyway. So just coming up with these statements to replace those negative thoughts. You also need to forgive yourself. We are tough on ourselves. Many of you are perfectionists. We hold ourselves to this higher standard. And so you need to work on forgiving yourself and understand that these negative thoughts that come in do not have to define you. And then number 6 is so simple, but has a huge impact. Do things that bring you joy. Prioritize spending time with things that bring you joy. It doesn't have to be extravagant. It can be, I'm going to spend 10 minutes looking at funny animal videos on YouTube or something, or listening to music. We know music really affects our emotions. And so something that brings you joy, something just for you. So I've given you some suggestions, but what are you going to do with these suggestions? So we need to start small. So my suggestion would be, commit to yourself in the next 7 to 10 days that you're going to say no once. Just practice it. Stalling. I like this. This is when someone makes a request, allow some time to think about it. It is critical for people pleasers not to give an immediate answer, which we want to. We want to immediately tell you yes because it makes us feel good. Do not give that immediate answer. Instead, say, let me get back to you. Set limits. So if you do agree to do something, don't let that person determine the time limits. You determine, I can meet with you or I can come do this, but I can only come for an hour. So you take control and set those limits. I love D. I had not thought about this till I was reading this article. It talks about time blocking. So you, each week when you're setting up your schedule, or each month, however you do it, block off a certain amount of time. Again, it can be 30 minutes, it could be 2 hours where you are not available during that time. I mean, it's got to be a dire emergency. E is so important as well. Rehearsing saying no. Rehearse, practice how you're going to say it. Practice the common things people are asking you that you want to say no to. Rehearse how you're going to say no. So I cannot go through this whole conversation without mentioning the word boundaries, because setting boundaries is key to becoming a recovered people pleaser. So when the next time someone asks you how to do something, think about, how do you feel about this action? Do you actually have time to do it and still meet your own needs? And how is it going to make you feel? Something else, people pleasers, a lot of times are automatically volunteering. I want to encourage you to wait until you're actually asked for help. This might be a challenge for some of you, but to wait. Another thing you can do is talk to a therapist. There are some deep-rooted things that could have happened, again, like we touched on earlier, in childhood and needing approval and neglect and all of that. And so talking to a therapist can be so beneficial. You can identify some of the behaviors that you're doing. You can recognize the impact. I was talking to Evelyn before we got on that sometimes just hearing it from a professional and not a family or friend really makes a difference, because I always tell my clients, I'm a professional. I have nothing to benefit by not telling you the truth. And so when you're working with a therapist, you can learn how to become empowered and how to change things and really focus on your values. If we say we have certain values in life, I value self-care, are my actions matching that? And you can learn about healthy boundaries and practice those. I love this quote. It says, "No is a complete sentence." It's by Anne Lamott. Honestly, I don't know who she is, but I love her quote. Um, so we need to recognize what makes you prone to people pleasing, and you need to get clear on those non-negotiables. What is something that you will always say no to, and have that in your mind, what you're going to say no to and why. Again, practice what you're going to say. And this next one's so important. As you move forward, set boundaries with your new relationships. Set that standard, because people treat you how you allow them to treat you. But I know you have people that you already have current relationships in, and so definitely expect pushback. Another thing you can do is think about all the benefits you'll have by setting these boundaries. How will you change? How is your life going to become better? Will you feel more authentic to your values, your desires? And keep that vision in front of you, and think about it daily. This next one's huge. You're going to feel guilty. When you first start setting boundaries, you are going to feel guilty. I promise you it gets easier over time. You're going to learn that your life is more balanced. It's going to allow you to be more present, more engaged in things that you're doing. And so there's an article here that says, check out these ways to be nicer to yourself. I pulled out some of them, and we're going to talk about them. Speak your mind. Again, sometimes we've been socialized or in our culture not to speak our mind. And so learn to say no, or if you're not comfortable saying no, learn to say, I'm going to have to get back to you on that. This is another quote. It says, daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others, by Brene Brown. She is huge about boundaries. I suggest Googling her, and she has wonderful teachings on that. So here's some examples. So when you want to set boundaries about feelings, you can say, I hear that you're feeling disconnected from me and you want to spend some more time together. And I want to too, but I cannot do it tonight. What about, and fill it in. Gratitude boundaries. If someone's sharing a concern that really is none of their business, you can say, thank you for your concern about such and such. I'll take it from here. This next one's huge. Ride the pause. Saying nothing. Someone texts you. Why do you think you have to text them right back? Set your new boundaries that say, I'm not going to text back until whatever. Or set a time that I'm not going to accept phone calls. And schedule your boundaries. So you can say, I'm working on something right now, but I can meet with you at such and such. Or remember, let me get back with you about that. Realize that self-care is not selfish. All of us need help, even you perfectionists. I'm a recovered perfectionist too. We can't go through life alone, and we certainly cannot go through caregiving, whether you're a professional, personally, or both, alone. Asking for help is not weak. We need to take care of ourselves. We don't have time to go into all of the self-care strategies, but I wanted to mention rest. You've got to get sleep. You've got to take care of yourself. There are so many consequences of not getting enough sleep. There's a link here that you can read about it. It affects our physical health, our mental health. If we're grumpy and tired, it affects our relationships. It affects how we eat. It affects everything. There's so much negative impact that you've got to take time and rest for yourself. Many of you just need some alone time. It's not selfish. And it's good because it can be exhausting being a people pleaser, socially interacting with others. And there's no shame in saying, I need this alone time. And number 4 is tough. It might be time to end some relationships, some jobs, some certain situations you're in. Because if you feel bad when you're interacting with someone and you have so much dread and there's not any benefit for you, I'm suggesting you rethink your relationship. Is it affecting your well-being? So I want to touch on some resources here. As Evelyn mentioned, I get excited. I love resources because we don't have enough time to go over each of them. And I want to make sure we have time to discuss some things. But I want to bring some up to you. Here's an article. It says, turn people-pleasing behaviors into self-protective ones. So here's an additional one. Some more resources on how to stop people-pleasing. 3 ways to combat your people-pleasing instinct. Some other links here. Put some worksheets. There's some therapeutic worksheets here. So there's a self-esteem worksheet. So it helps walk you through how to build your self-esteem. Something else we don't talk about a lot is I put a worksheet here for strengths. When we have low self-esteem or when we want to people please other, we're devaluing ourselves and not thinking of the strengths. And so this gives you a list of strengths that helps you brainstorm, hey, I am this, and it helps build your self-esteem and your self-worth. If you need to practice on how to say no, here is an article on that. Here's another worksheet on setting boundaries. So it'll walk you through, you write out things. If you're like me, I'm old school. I like the pen and paper. So I print it out, I fill it out. Here's some self-care strategies for an actual caregiver. And then we talked on guilt. Guilt makes a heavy burden. Don't let it drag you down. So there's some information on that as well. And so in summary, we talked about the numbers and the impact of caregiving. We talked about people pleasing. We went over some definitions, some signs, some of the causes, and how it affects you, how it's detrimental. We talked about some ways how to become a recovered people pleaser. And then I put some resources as well. I want to read some of these quotes. It says, givers need to set limits because takers rarely do.
Mhm.
I know. And this other one, the only people who get upset about you setting boundaries are the ones who are benefiting from you having none. When someone oversteps your boundaries, they're letting you know that what you want doesn't matter. And my favorite, I use this whether you're a people pleaser or other things. Whatever you are willing to put up with is exactly what you will get. You show people how to treat you. Before we go on to talking about this, a little off topic because I'm an Alzheimer's advocate, I wanted to share, I can't even say it, I'm not even going to pretend I can pronounce it, but I've put 2 links here with some information about the new medication that was approved, and it breaks it down and explains stuff. One of them's a video, and I even put this information that I got emailed. It breaks this down. What is the drug? How do you receive it? How safe is it? How could you be a candidate? How can you get it through providers? How much does it cost? And lots of links. So I just wanted to share that as well for those of you that wanted to learn more about that. So that is a lot of information. And so now it's time. I know. And so, but I always email this information to Evelyn in PDF form so that you can have all this information. You can have the links to it. And my email is on here. You are welcome to email me if you have any questions. But Evelyn, if you want to take over.
Wow. Thank you so much. Such great information and reminders to all of us caregivers and professional caregivers, even about the naughty things that we do every day. I wanted to add another resource, if you don't mind. We had a great podcast. We've had several of them by Dr. Jamie Heisman, who's also a psychologist and an LCSW. And he's a trauma therapist. And he belongs to an association called Complex PTSD and talks a lot about the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, kind of cascade that happens. And it says the reason, the whole thing about the childhood, is that you try to please your parents. And so many of those things move forward. And so in the process of doing that, you develop toxic relationships. And he talks about how to get rid of toxic relationships because they suck the life out of you. So it's very much what you were
Excellent.
talking about. And I think people would enjoy going to our podcast list and maybe picking up some of Dr. Jamie Heisman's presentations.
Excellent. I'm going to head to that as well. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Yes, I have a question for you.
Yes.
I don't see anybody else with one yet. So, one of the things that I find always really hard is when people say, I'm overwhelmed, I'm doing too much. My loved one or my care recipient has dementia. All they do is yell at me. They're not appreciative. There's no gratitude. I don't know how I'm getting any benefit out of this. What would you say to that?
I would say as caregivers, you definitely need to get support. You cannot do this alone. And, I always practice these presentations on my mom to make sure they're clear and come across. And she was talking about, when she was caregiving for my father, that she said, "Thank you, Natalee, for pushing me and really fighting with me and making me take care of myself." She said, I was such a social person. And I thought, oh, being a caregiver means I have to stop. And so what that taught me was even the most independent people, we need others. And so if you're a caregiver and you're drained and it's overwhelming, always, always go to support groups. I go to a support group. I don't go as Dr. Natalee Oliver education. I go as Natalee, the daughter of someone with dementia. So I go to a support group and I hear others. And so I know I'm not alone. So I think asking for help is so important. And I've done trainings on that of, how we need to educate our families, how we need to ask for help. Because honestly, if you're not a caregiver, you don't get it a lot of times. You just don't understand. Or if you're not in the field, you don't get it. So it takes education. And believe me, I've had to educate my sisters, my nephews and nieces, and all of that on what it means to have my father who has dementia live with me 24/7, and my mom is his primary. So it takes education. It takes taking time for yourself, asking help for others, and getting that peer support from others. That would be my first response.
Great. We've had caregivers who have told us that, one of their biggest problems is that they're the caregiver, the primary caregiver, and the family lives other places. And the family comes and visits for maybe one day a month or a couple hours a week, and they don't see the problem. They don't see the dementia. They don't see the stress. They don't see the lack of boundaries. They don't know what to do.
Oh, very common. And so what I would suggest is they need to be educated. And so I love the Alzheimer's Association's website. It is the most understandable. And so if you go to alz.org, and I would send them a couple of links and articles and say, don't give them this whole long list, but make some main points of they need to be educated about the disease. Because if people don't understand the disease, they don't understand that it can be fluid and that one day your symptoms can be there and the next day they can't. And so they need to be educated. I think another thing is that keeping a journal of what's going on, you have those examples, you have how often it's happening to share with them. Another one is, we live in technology, pick up your phone and record it. You could show them this. I want you to see what some of these interactions are. And so another good thing is let dad come stay with you for a week.
Yeah.
And so it is, and it's also
Well,
hard.
those
There's
are the
so
ones
many
with boundaries, though.
right, exactly. But there's so many dynamics, and there's so many that goes into your family, this history and I've mentioned this before. It doesn't matter how many letters I have behind my name. I'm the baby. I'm Natalee. I don't know anything. They remember me when I was 5. And so, sometimes it takes my family to hear it from other people and not from me. And so it's just that educating them, recording it, keeping a journal, letting them spend time with it. And sometimes it just, choosing your battles. do I want to fight back with them, or do I want to say, oh, and something else I read an article years ago that I love, and it talked about when you're asking for help, you've got to match the abilities of what you're asking for someone. So if someone asks me, Natalie, can you cook a meal for them? No, I don't cook. But what I can do is I can get my dad in the car and we can go to Whataburger through the drive-through because he loves it, or we can sit and play Uno. Those are the skill sets that I have with him. So really matching what I need from family members or those that will help with what their abilities and what they can do. But sometimes you're just going to have the know-it-alls. Sometimes you're just going to have the ones that are just not going to believe it until it gets really bad further along. But they need to spend time with them. That's what I say. Spend more than just the week you flew in.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a tough one.
It is. It is.
Yeah. And oftentimes the people who are not volunteering to help are the ones who've got the very straight boundaries about how much they're going to do and not do. So it's almost like, they need to catch a little bit of that people pleaser stuff.
Yes. And a lot of times they just have this, what we call the cognitive distortion of this all or nothing or black and white thinking. And caregiving's gray. Caregiving and dementia is gray. It is not always this or never this. And so I think education's so key, but that they have to want to receive that education. They have to want that. And sometimes you're just not going to have that. And, what I've learned and what many people have learned that I've helped is that people say things they don't mean. Family does not mean that they're going to be there. So you have to find, what is my support system? Is it a support group? Is it professionals, hiring professionals to come in and help? Is it is it friends? Is it church members, other communities? Sometimes it's not always family that's going to help, even when they say, and some people have that best intention, but they don't follow through.
Okay, folks, please. We're going to open up the lines here. We'd love to hear from you. You've heard enough chatter from us for the time being. Please open your phones. If you're on the phone, you can press *6. And if you are on Zoom, you can use the chat room, or you can unmute yourself, or you can, what's the other thing? You can, yeah.
Chuck has his hand up.
Great. Thank you. Hi, Chuck.
Hello. Thanks for all the information. It's a lot. And a lot of it, like you said at the beginning, is a review. But what we were just talking about, a very difficult situation. Mom and dad were married for 60 years. Mom died about 9.5 years ago. And I became dad's legal healthcare surrogate and primary caregiver. I'm married. I live on the other side of Jacksonville, which is really big. If you're not familiar with it, I'm about an hour away from dad. My older brother moved back into the house with dad after mom died. That's it. He just moved back into the house. He does nothing to care for dad. He's in his room with the door closed, almost nothing. He makes my job more difficult. I ask him, how's dad doing this week? Because I only go over, at least twice a week, and more depending on doctor appointments. Oh, he's fine. He doesn't care. For the topic we're talking about, my brother's people pleasing, I just realized, is, quote, his other family, not his father, or me. So I have had to set boundaries. I don't even talk to my brother anymore unless it's needed for dad, because everything comes out of his mouth is a virtual lie. I can't depend on it. He doesn't do what he's supposed to. He doesn't do it right. Dad wanted vanilla ice cream. He brought chocolate. So you can't even ask him to, anyway, so that makes it more difficult. And things that I've done to care for myself. I'm a list master. I make lists of everything. And somebody asked me a couple months ago, have I ever made a self-care list? No, I haven't. totally over I never thought about that. So I've got one going and it's got 44 things on it so far. And, it's just something because when I get in the middle of something or once I'm in it, I can't think straight because I've got my own medical issues to deal with. I just have to remember, go to the list and start reading down it until there's something I can do. And I want to prioritize it time-wise, something that just takes a couple minutes or something that might take an hour, like a support group meeting or something. That's been really helpful for me. And also a positive affirmations list. And that's, I don't know, I've got over 300, things on there for that. And I just pulled them from all over the place and just to read down it. And, oh yeah, that one fits me. So I'll highlight that one. But just reading it, helps.
Go ahead.
That's and I just wanted to say, well, I could talk for 30 minutes, but one thing I wanted to say that I've realized, if I do all the work, I get to have all the resentment.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes.
So,
That's a powerful statement. And first of all, thank you for sharing. It's caregiving is tough stuff, and some people just don't want to talk about it. So I appreciate your vulnerability and your honesty. And sadly, it's so common for I'm just speaking generally, it's very common when things like this happen, people that move in or things like that are doing things that benefit themselves, like, oh, I can save on rent or whatever, I'll take care of them, and then they don't. That's very common, which is heartbreaking. It's true. But I love the list. And, even if you have to, because a lot of us use calendars, whether it's old school, writing it down, or in our phone, putting it in there, every little thing, like for me, because I'm doing 100 things at once, I have to put every little thing I'm doing so that I remember. So even if it's take time for me to schedule that time, and again, unless it is a dire emergency, to do it. And I love those positive affirmations as well, because, research shows us that saying those things out loud, it goes back to that fake it till you make it, saying those things and training our brain and starting to believe that. And so saying those, like, for instance, I do not have to say yes to everything. I have a right to take care of myself. I do not have to be perfect. Those kinds of things. It's kind of saying them, retraining them, and starting to believe them. And then that's going to change our mindset and our mood. So I hear what you're saying. It's a lot, and it's frustrating because we're dealing with people, and we're dealing with family, and we're dealing with, the whole dynamics of people. It's hard. And so, but you're doing what you can, and then you're also doing self-care. And it sounds like you're doing the best that you can with the situation that you're in, but it's hard. It's so great. Anything, Evelyn, you wanted to add to that?
No, but I do have a chat from Andre.
Okay.
If I may, many thanks for this quality presentation. Some family members and caregivers within our clients' families should definitely be exposed to this information. In another field of practice, having worked in rehab for many years, in fact, some rehab patients should also be informed of these principles, in a sense that we sometimes face an overdose of dependency toward their loved ones, as if their lives now had to be spent at their service.
I love that. That's well put, definitely. Yes, this, like I touched on, I'm not an expert on that dependent personality disorder, but yes, when we lose ourselves and we're so worried about others, there's just no quality of life in that. And so, like I talked about in the presentation, the first part's awareness. And then the second part is committing, okay, what am I going to do with this awareness? Let me start monitoring these patterns and little baby steps. It took me a long time to work through my people pleasing professionally and personally. But let me tell you, I have no problem saying no now. And people, family knows, Natalie's going to tell you politely, but no, I can't do that. No, I'm not going to do that. But it took a lot because I had to learn that I'm more than what other people think of me.
And there's always a nice ways to say no.
For sure.
Coming from
Sure.
management, people would, come and say, oh, I found this great deal and I want to take this vacation on such and such a date. And you're looking at it and you take a deep breath and you go like, okay, I've got 5 other people out. That ain't gonna work. And so it's, boy, would I really love for you to be able to do that. But it's just not
Right.
time,
Right.
we've got to figure out another time for you to have that fun and that advantage and that, the trip that you want to take so badly.
Definitely.
There's a very nice way. And part of it, I think, is taking that deep breath. And you talked about that. Step back a little bit.
Ride the pause.
That's
It was, that term came from a coworker of mine that became a really good friend because I had the people pleaser, the type A. And she was like, Natalee, when I first became a social worker, she's like, you can't be social worker to the world. Ride the pause. It's okay. Because what happens is the people pleaser in us, when we say no and there's this pause, a lot of times we get nervous. So we have to start talking. Let's ride that pause. And let's think about our answers. And then that's why if we practice rehearsing them, how we're going to say them, then we can respond better. Silence is okay. We don't have to feel it.
Yeah, great. Okay, let's see. Here's another one from Andre. She has given us a lot of good information lately. I was considering the issue of the person facing rehab and potential handicap and thinking that their family members owed it to them to be at their service.
Person facing rehab and the potential handicap and thinking that the family members owed it to them to be at their service. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Andre?
Like they weren't being there to help them? Is that what you're saying?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Hi. No, I was more thinking that when I work in rehab for quite a few decades, actually, we would have, of course, many of our patients had a huge potential for success, for independence, for autonomy. And still, because they were facing those hurdles, they would quickly turn around and say, well, my wife will do that for me. There's no need for me to learn to do this or that. And of course, we had the difficulty, or I would say the challenge, to convince the wife that no, she didn't have to engage her whole the rest of her life to do that. And there was, of course, a conflict of I would say sometimes just not morality, but of values, and of course with the generation as well. It would be interesting to have a study, or maybe there are already, on how are the next generations will face that, in saying that if you do have potential to take care of yourself, I will be there to assist if you can't. But what you can do, it's not up to me to take charge of. So that was more my, and I remember doing a presentation to the volunteers at our hospital. And the title was Stroke Rehabilitation, Is There Such a Thing as Too Much Help? And so that was my point.
Definitely, and I think I might have mentioned it earlier, I can't remember, but we have what's called this learned helplessness, and I have to do that with my father because my mom wants, he wears oxygen, but he'll take it off to walk and he'll come back. And if it's pushed back and he doesn't want to stretch his arm, he'll go, hand me my oxygen. And my mom wants to get up and do it. I'm like, no, Mom. And so with someone with dementia, I talk through the steps. Push your side table up, put your hand in there, pull it out, put it over your head. Because then it still keeps that independence. But it's true. What will happen if someone needs rehabilitation or they have dementia is we will teach them this learned helplessness to where they're convinced I can't do it or someone else will. So I love your point. We need to keep them as independent as possible because that autonomy, that dignity, that self-worth, even someone with dementia still needs that. Even if they don't know your name, they still have that sense of, I can do this by myself. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. And I think at one point, sorry, just one more thing. I think it's when we are talking about in through time, the more you allow the person to take care of themselves by themselves, the more you put back the inevitable that at one point you will be totally overwhelmed. So it's in doing so, you take care of both of yourself and of your loved one.
Definitely. Such a great point. Thank you so much.
Great point. Okay, folks, we're approaching the top of the hour here. I have time for maybe one more question, and then I have an announcement. Anybody else want to talk? I want to really thank those of you who joined us with your experiences, because it means so much to us and to other caregivers. So I don't see anything. Go ahead.
Could I ask?
Yes.
My name's Chris.
Hello.
Hi. So you spoke about fight, flight, fawn. What is the healthy thing?
Oh goodness, do we have another day? No, I will say this. I'm not the expert on trauma, but I think you probably need to work with a therapist on past experiences, how you're responding. Like, I am a freeze. And so I've learned that. And so, you know, I'm not a flight or a fight. I kind of freeze during things. And so I have to learn, okay, Natalee, quit freezing. You've got to react to this. And so I don't have probably a more adequate answer for that. But I think the person you were talking about, the other one that talked about trauma, their website.
Right. Dr. Jamie Heisman. And also the Complex PTSD Association has a website of their own. You could probably find some information on there too. So, but that podcast might be really good for you about the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And they become personality types, you know, as we age. So I'm sorry, I'm going to draw this to a close because it's the top of the hour and I respect people's time. We have one more session next Tuesday on July 25th, and that will be current issues in long-term care with dear Lucy and Elliot Montgomery Sklar. And I don't know what happened, Natalee. I hope you can still hear me, but maybe you're logging back in. I want to thank Natalee so much for everything that she has taught us today, reminded us about, niggled us about, because we all need that once in a while. We kind of forget what we know is the right thing to do. And I want to thank all of you caregivers for what you do. You will be getting a post-session questionnaire with the resources that Natalee mentioned, getting a couple of days. We hope you will take the time to fill that out. It really helps us improve the program. And if you're not registered, you really need to register in order to get those resources and our monthly calendar. And you can register by calling 866-390-6491. That's 866-390-6491. And I am so sorry Natalee didn't come back, but I will call her personally and thank her from all of you, because I've gotten so many of those in the chat room. And I really appreciate what you do as a caregiver and for being here today. And with that, I'm going to stop the recording and thank you all so much.